Spindlehaven was a monument to bad orbits and worse decisions. It was not a planet. It was not even a proper station. It was a metal calamity. A spindle of fused freighters, asteroid mining rigs, and generation ships that had run out of generations. It hung in the black, precisely 1 parsec, outside the Aurelian Empire's legal jurisdiction, rotating just fast enough to keep most of the inhabitants from floating away. This was the fringe. The air smelled of ozone, recycled protein, and desperation. The economy ran on misdirected cargo, forged credentials, and the kind of secrets that got people vaporized. Every docking bay, every neon-slicked corridor, every pressurized bazaar was a tangled nest where 100 different species haggled, fought, and fled. Jackson Reed preferred the guts of the station to the skin. He was currently shoulder-deep in the coolant system of a beverage dispenser. His knuckles scraped raw against oxidized shielding. The copper narwhal, the bar surrounding the dispenser, was loud. It was always loud. Even at mid-cycle, the clientele, a mix of disgruntled pilots, black market geneticists, and low-level bounty hunters, kept the noise at a dull roar. Jackson was, by trade and by disposition, a mechanic, a shipwright, officially, though he rarely worked on ships anymore. He fixed the things that kept the station breathing: air scrubbers, pressure seals, nutrient vats, and, today, a beverage dispenser suffering from a terminal case of structural neglect. He was good. He was, if the hushed rumors in the maintenance tunnels were to be believed, a kind of mechanical miracle worker. He did not just fix things, he healed them. He diagnosed stressed metal the way a biologist might diagnose a virus, sensing the subtle harmonics of machinery that was seconds away from catastrophic failure. This talent, however, was something Jackson kept quiet. He kept everything quiet. He was a man defined by his avoidance of conflict. He wore nondescript gray overalls, kept his hair short, and never made eye contact with anyone holding a weapon, which, on Spindlehaven, meant he spent a lot of time studying his boots. He was stuck. This was the dominant thought in his mind, a low, constant hum beneath the noise of the bar. He was trapped between a past he could not remember, just foggy, nightmarish images of fire and falling metal, and a promise he could not forget. The promise was a splinter in his consciousness, a feeling of an immense, unpaid debt. A duty so profound it anchored his otherwise aimless existence. He finished wiring the bypass, the acidic sting of solder filling his nose. He sealed the panel, wiping synthesized grease from his hands onto a rag that had given up absorption 3 days ago. Is the sacred elixir flowing? Or are you just admiring the internal combustion? Borvo, the copper narwhal's proprietor, loomed over him. Borvo was a Xylotian, a species that resembled a collection of petrified logs bound by thick, fungal sinew. He had 3 functioning eyes, all of which were currently aimed at Jackson with amused skepticism. Jackson tapped the dispenser's main panel. The lights flickered from angry red to a placid blue. "It'll pour," Jackson said. His voice was rough from disuse. "But I cannot promise what it's pouring is safe for carbon-based life. That filtration unit has seen better millennia." Borvo let out a sound like rocks grinding together, which Jackson had learned was a laugh. "Safe is bad for business. Reed, my customers like a little risk in their refreshments. Makes them feel alive. You, on the other hand, you look like you are actively trying to be dead." "Just trying to get paid." "Borvo, you hear the chatter?" Borvo asked, polishing a glass that was already clean. He lowered his voice, which still sounded like a minor avalanche. The black Jackson stiffened, but forced himself to relax. He started packing his tools. He hated chatter. Chatter led to attention. Attention led to trouble. A new contract is out, Borvo continued, leaning closer. High level, Regency Council paper. They are paying astronomical sums. They always are. Not like this. The Archon himself is running the hunt. Jackson paused. Even he knew that name. Archon Sable. Sable was not a bounty hunter. He was an enforcer. A beautifully tailored instrument of the Regency Council. The body that had ruled the Aurelian Empire since the Empress vanished 5 years prior. Sable did not collect bail jumpers. He collected high-value dissidents and erased political embarrassments. He's hunting, Borvo whispered. Get this. Lost royal assets. Jackson zipped his tool bag. Sounds like antique furniture, not my line of work. The dispenser cost you 20 credits for the parts. 10 for the labor. Borvo grunted, annoyed at Jackson's disinterest. You are no fun, Reed. You are the only human I know who has zero curiosity. It is unnatural. Go on. Get out. And try not to look so... gray. Jackson nodded. Taking the small electronic chit Borvo slid across the bar. 30 credits. It would buy him food for another week. He turned to leave, already plotting the quietest route, back to his pressurized hole-in-the-wall apartment on Deck 9. He was halfway to the door, shoulder-checking a pair of giggling, multi-limbed navigators, when he passed a table of hunters. They were rough, armored, their blasters sitting on the table next to half-empty glasses. Swear on my mother's spawn. The Archon is sweeping the entire fringe, one of them. A scaled Crete was saying. Heard he glassed a moon over in the Cinder Rifts, just on a rumor. But what are they? Another? A human woman with a chrome eye asked. Assets nobody has seen the Aurelian heirs since the Empress disappeared. People say they died in the secession. They are not what? The Crete hissed, leaning in. They are who? And they are not heirs. They are something else, something the Council wants back before the Ascension Centennial. If you see anything matching the profile, you do not engage, you just report. Sable's paying 1 million standards just for the data. Jackson kept walking. 1 million standard problems were not his. His problems were 30 credit problems. He reached for the door control. The pressurized hiss of the entryway, already sounding like freedom. It was the hiss of the door that masked their entry. It did not open. It blasted open, slamming against the bulkhead with a groan of tortured metal. The bar went silent. Not a gradual fade. It was a switch flip. The music died. The talking ceased. The only sound was the clatter of a dropped glass and the sudden, sharp intake of 200 breaths from 20 different species. 2 children stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the blinding neon of the Haven corridor. They were small, frighteningly small. A boy and a girl, perhaps 6 and 7 years old. They were wearing rags that might have once been fine clothes, now scorched and torn. They were filthy, streaked with soot, and trembling. They scanned the room, their eyes wide and bright with terror. The clientele of the Copper Narwhal stared back. Hunters, smugglers, killers. They all stared, slowly, deliberately. The Crete slid his blaster off the table and placed it on the floor, kicking it under the chair. The woman with the chrome eye raised her hands, palms open, in the universal gesture of non-engagement. Throughout the bar, other patrons, individuals Jackson knew for a fact had murdered people for spilling their drink, began to carefully, almost fearfully, back away. They were not looking at the children. They were looking at Jackson, their expressions a sudden, bizarre mix of terror and awe. Jackson looked down at the children. He could feel their hearts hammering against his legs. He saw it then, on the back of the girl's hand, and on the boy's neck, just below his ear. It was not a tattoo. It was a sigil, glowing with a soft, pulsing, holographic light. The golden-crested hawk of the Aurelian Empire. It was the royal signet. "This is a mistake," Jackson whispered, his voice cracking. The girl, Iria, looked up at him. Her face was smudged with grime, but her eyes were clear. "We are not mistaken," she said, her real voice, small and piping, followed by the translator's echo. "You are the anchor. We are Iria. He is Call, and they are coming." Jackson's blood ran cold. He did not understand the word anchor, but he understood they are coming. He looked at the bar's entrance. The stunned patrons were already cowering, moving toward the exits. "Borvo," Jackson said, his voice finding a command he did not know it had. "Lock the door, now!" Borvo, his three eyes wide, fumbled for the control. "And," Jackson added, his mind racing, do not call anyone." "Jackson, what is this?" Borvo hissed. "This is not your brand of trouble, Adage." "Boy, it is now," Jackson said. He looked down. "It seems I have a new brand." He felt it, the resonance. The outline described it as a strange empathy. But it was more than that. It was a thrum in his bones, a feeling like a massive engine coming online nearby. It was the splinter in his mind, the forgotten promise, suddenly flaring from a dull ache to a burning point of light. He did not know these children, but his very soul insisted that he did. He suspected a setup, a complex manipulation, but the terror in their grips was not fake. The glow of the sigils was not a bar trick, and the fear from the bounty hunters was definitely not fake. Before Borvo's hand could hit the lock command, the door blasted inward a second time. This was not a pair of small children. This was a fire team, 4 men, clad in matte black armor that absorbed the bar's neon light. Their visors were mirrored, opaque, reflecting the terrified faces of the bar patrons. They moved with the silent, fluid precision of apex predators. They were not hunters. They were soldiers. "The assets are located," the leader said, his voice a synthesized rasp. "Secure them. Lethal protocols authorized for the abductor." Jackson looked around. The abductor. He realized, with a cold, sinking clarity, that he was the abductor. The bounty hunters who had backed down for Dad were now scrambling, diving under tables. They were afraid of the implication of harming a protected child. These new soldiers had no such qualms. They saw the children as assets. They saw Jackson as an obstacle. The leader raised his pulse rifle. Jackson had 2 seconds. His mind, usually so placid, so avoidant, snapped into a different mode. The world slowed. He saw the tactical layout. 4 men, 1 exit, 2 children on his legs. He was a mechanic. He fixed things. And this situation was very, very broken. His eyes flicked to the bar, to the very dispenser he had just repaired. The new high-voltage capacitor, the damp, spilled synthale all over Borvo's counter, the metal floor plates. He did not let go of the children. He could not. "Hold your breath," he snapped. He reached back to his tool belt. He did not grab a weapon. He grabbed his insulated diagnostic wrench. The first soldier opened fire. The bolt of plasma sizzled past Jackson's ear. So close, it singed his hair, and exploded the glassware behind Borvo's head. In that instant, Jackson stomped his foot not on the floor, but on the exposed power conduit for the dispenser. The one he had just reseated. He jammed his wrench into the junction box, shorting the entire system. It was not an explosion. It was an overload. He did not just short the dispenser. He shorted the entire sector's grid, pulling every amp of power from the surrounding area and channeling it into the metal floor plates of the copper narwhal. It was not enough to kill. He was a healer, even in a fight. but it was enough to deliver a 50,000-volt non-lethal shock to 4 men, encased in conductive metal armor. The soldiers did not scream. They just seized, their limbs locking, their systems shorting out, and they fell like statues, smoke pouring from the joints of their armor. Jackson ripped his wrench free as the emergency lights, running on a separate battery, kicked in, bathing the bar in blood-red light. The entire bar was silent, save for the hum of the fried circuits and the quiet, terrified whimpers of the 2 children still clinging to his legs. Jackson looked at the 4 smoking soldiers. Then he looked at Borvo, who was peering over the bar, all 3 of his eyes blinking rapidly. Jackson pointed at the twitching soldiers. "Sorry about the mess, Borvo," Jackson said, his voice surprisingly steady. "But the 5-credit special on shock therapy just expired." He gently, very gently, detached the children from his overalls. "We are leaving." He grabbed their hands. They felt impossibly small. He pulled them toward the back exit, the one that led to the maintenance tunnels he knew better than his own name. "Jackson!" Borvo called out, his voice shaking. "Sable's men." That was Archon Sable's personal guard. You cannot do that. You just signed your own death warrant." Jackson paused at the entryway, the red light casting a long shadow in front of him. "Maybe," Jackson said. He looked down at Iria and Kale. The girl was looking up at him, not with terror anymore, but with a fierce, burning curiosity. He turned back to Borvo. "Tell them, I am just a mechanic. Tell them I am nobody." "They will not believe me," Borvo whispered. "No," Jackson agreed, and for the first time in years he felt the fog in his mind clear, just a little. "They probably will not." He pulled the children into the darkness of the maintenance tunnels, the sound of the stations distant, grinding gears swallowing them whole. He was running. He was running through a dripping, labyrinthine tunnel, a 6-year-old's hand in his right, a 7-year-old's hand in his left. The air smelled of rust and decay. He had no plan. He had no weapons. He had just declared war on the most powerful man on the fringe. He ducked under a low-hanging pipe and pulled the kids into a small, dark alcove, a capacitor junction he had serviced last month. He needed a minute. He needed to think. "Okay," he panted, letting them go. "Okay, this is not good." The 2 children just stared at him. The glow from their sigils was faint in the darkness, casting strange, moving shadows on their small, serious faces. "Why me?" Jackson asked, the question exploding out of him. The bar was full of people, big people, people with guns. "Why me?" "You were the only one," the boy, Kale, said. His voice was soft. "The only one? What the only one? Stupid enough to get caught in the middle." "The only one," Iria said, stepping forward. "Who was not afraid?" "I am terrified," Jackson hissed. "I am absolutely, completely terrified." "No," Iria insisted, shaking her head. "They were afraid." She pointed back toward the bar they had fled. "Those hunters. They were afraid of us. Those soldiers. They were afraid of losing us." She stepped closer, close enough that Jackson could see the intricate, almost mechanical-looking patterns in her violet eyes. "But you," she said, "you were just fixing the box. You were sad, but you were not afraid. Not until we came." Jackson's defenses crumbled under the weight of that simple, impossible observation. He sat down hard on a rusted pipe. "And Dad?" Jackson asked, the word feeling alien and ridiculous on his tongue. Why did those hunters stop?" Cale spoke up, his hand resting on the hilt of a toy knife Jackson just noticed was tucked into his belt. The Imperial Code, Article 4, Section 3. The word of a child of the blood bearing the signet is law. When a guardian and anchor is declared, that bond is sacred. To interfere is high treason. Jackson stared at him. You are, what, 6? I am 7, Kyle said, indignant. And she is 8. You are quoting imperial law. We had a very good tutor, Iria said. Before he was taken, Jackson rubbed his face, the grease and grime mixing with cold sweat. So, you walk into a bar. You point at the nearest grease monkey. You call him Dad. And suddenly, he is a sacred anchor. And every bounty hunter in the sector has to back off. Yes, Iria said. That is how the anchor protocol works. But, Jackson said, leaning in, it did not work on those soldiers. Iria's face fell. No. The protocol is ancient law. The Regency Council does not. They do not care about ancient law. They only care about assets. Jackson's mind was reeling. A game. A massive, complex, galactic game. He was holding 2 of the pieces. Or maybe, he thought, as he looked at their intelligent, weary eyes. The pieces were holding him. You knew I would react, Jackson said. You knew I could do that. With the electricity. No, Cale said. He looked at Iria. We just knew you were the anchor, the sigil. It resonates. It is warm. Near you. Jackson looked at his own hands. A mechanic's hands, calloused, stained, scarred. He felt nothing. Nothing but the thrum of the station's engines and the crushing weight of this new reality. He was Jackson Reed. He was nobody. He was a man hiding from a past he could not even see. And he had just, very publicly, adopted the 2 most wanted children in the Aurelian Empire. Come on, Jackson said, standing up. He slung his tool bag over his shoulder. They will be sealing the sector. We have about 10 minutes before this station becomes a cage. We have to go. Go where? Iria asked. Jackson looked down the dark, dripping tunnel. He thought of his quiet room, his safe, gray, anonymous life. It was gone, vaporized. Somewhere, Jackson said, taking their hands again. That is not here. The maintenance tunnel was a gut, a cold, metal intestine that had not been properly cleaned in a century. Jackson ran, his footsteps echoing, swallowed by the drip of corrosive condensation and the ever-present groan of Spindlehaven shifting on its unstable axis. He had one arm wrapped around Cale, the other hand gripping Iria's. The children ran silently, their terror a palpable thing, a cold energy that seemed to pulse in time with the faint, holographic glow of their sigils. He was running on pure adrenaline and a mechanic's knowledge. He knew the station's weaknesses, its forgotten passages, its structural lies. He took a sharp right, skidding on a patch of slimy sealant, and pulled them through a gap in the bulkhead that looked like a mistake. It was a service junction, barely wide enough for one man. He pushed the children through first, then squeezed in after them, his tool bag catching on a jagged piece of metal. He ripped it free and slammed his hand onto a manual release valve. A heavy, insulated maintenance door hissed shut behind them, plunging them into near-total darkness. Jackson leaned against the door, his breath tearing at his lungs. The only light came from the children. The golden hawk on Iria's hand and the matching one on Cale's neck were pulsing brighter now. A soft, steady rhythm in the pitch black. This is not a long-term solution, Jackson wheezed, sliding down the bulkhead to sit on the gritty floor. They will seal this deck in minutes, They are already here, Cale whispered. His voice was small, but it cut through the darkness. They are loud in the system. Loud, Jackson asked. The station's comms, Iria explained, her voice trembling but precise. We can feel the data moving. They are looking for the abductor. She looked at Jackson. That is you. Jackson's stomach twisted. He was not a warrior. He was not a hero. He was the man who fixed things, so they would be left alone. He pulled his datapad from his overalls. The screen was cracked, but it lit up, its glow illuminating his grease-stained hands. He had one contact, one name in his entire list that was not a parts supplier or an automated billing service. It was a long shot. It was a stupid shot. He initiated a secure burst connection, a jury-rigged protocol he had built himself, bouncing the signal through 3 dead-end relays before it ever left the station. He waited. 1 agonizing second. 2, 3. The screen flickered, and a face appeared. It was an old face, wrinkled and weathered, framed by a shock of unruly white hair. The background was a sterile, brightly lit lab. Dr. Orrin Hale. A xenobiologist, Jackson had once fixed an atmospheric condenser for a job that had required him to sign 19 different non-disclosure agreements. Read. Dr. Hale's voice was sharp, a professor's bark. This is not your scheduled maintenance check. And this channel is for emergencies of a biological nature. Is one of your friends leaking? Or have you finally developed a personality? I need information, Doctor, Jackson said, his voice low and urgent. And I need you to forget you heard this. I forget 90% of my day, Reed. It is a matter of professional survival. What is it? Jackson angled the datapad's camera at the 2 children, who huddled closer to him. He focused on the glowing sigil on Iria's hand. This. Tell me what it is. And tell me if it is fake. Dr. Hale's face on the screen went from annoyed to rigid. He leaned in, his eyes widening. By the stars? Turn the illumination up. No. Wait. It is self-illuminating. Jackson. Where did you get this? They found me, Doctor. They called me. They called me Dad in a bar full of hunters. The hunters backed off. Then soldiers came and they did not. Soldiers. Hale's eyes darted off screen. Anchor Protocol, Article 4. The word of a child of the blood. Is law, Kel finished, his small voice echoing in the junction. Dr. Hale's gaze snapped to Kel. Heavens, it is real. Jackson. That is the royal signet of the Aurelian line. It is not a tattoo. It is a biological marker. A hologene. It is supposed to be dormant. It only ignites under specific, impossible conditions. What conditions? Jackson demanded. He could hear the distant slam of boots on metal. They were on this deck. In the presence of its designated anchor, Dr. Hale said, his voice dropping. A biopsychic resonator. A guardian in the old language. A living key. It is not just legal. Read. It is biological. That sigil is genetically coded to recognize one, and only one, anchor. It cannot be faked. It cannot be forged. And it cannot be activated by force. If it is glowing. He stared at Jackson, a look of profound, academic shock on his face. Jackson, it is not just real. It means that you are the anchor. I am a mechanic, Jackson hissed. I am not anyone's anything. The universe does not care about your job description. Read. Hale snapped. Listen to me. If the Regency Council is using soldiers, it means they are bypassing the Imperial Code. They are not trying to retrieve the heirs. They are trying to seize them. The Empress's disappearance. The Council's temporary rule. Jackson. These children are the only thing that can legally dissolve the Regency. They are not assets. They are a political apocalypse. The bulkhead door, 10 yards down the corridor, exploded inward. Jackson did not even flinch. He just ended the call, plunging the junction back into darkness. "They are here," Cale whispered, unnecessarily. Jackson's mind was clear. The fog of his past, the indecision, was burned away by the immediate physical threat. He was not a warrior, but he was a very, very good mechanic. He pushed the children toward a narrow ventilation shaft. "In. Now, go until you hit the first T-junction and wait for me." "We are not leaving you," Iria said, her voice fierce. "I am not asking. I am telling you, go. I will be right behind you, I promise." Iria hesitated, then nodded. She pushed Cale into the vent and scrambled in after him. Jackson turned to face the opening. He could see the beams of their flashlights cutting through the smoke. 3 of them. No, 4. A mixed-species team. A Rhodian. 2 humans in heavy armor, and a hulking, 4-armed basilisk. They were not Sable's men. They were hunters, locals. Probably, drawn by the commotion and the promise of a payday. "I know you are in here," Reed, the lead human, shouted. "The bounty just hit the network, 20 million standards. Alive. 10 for the kids, just send them out. We do not want to hurt you." "A lie," the Rhodian hissed, his blaster raised. "I am perfectly happy to hurt him." Jackson looked at the junction box on the wall. It was a high-voltage conduit, one he had just serviced last week. He saw the loose bundle of shielded cable, the half-empty tub of conductive sealant, the spare capacitor bank he had left on a shelf. He smiled. It was a thin, cold, angry smile. "Okay," Jackson whispered to himself. "You want to play. Let's play." He moved in the darkness with a speed he did not know he possessed. His hands, so used to the delicate work of microcircuitry, were now a blur, pulling, stripping, connecting. He worked by the pulsing light from the ventilation shaft, where the children's sigils were now glowing with an almost frantic energy. The first hunter, the Rhodian, stepped into the junction. "I smell him human grease." He raised his blaster, and then he stopped. He looked confused. He looked down. A thick, shimmering, silvery blue light was wrapping around his boots. It looked like a hologram. It was coming from the vent. It was Kyle. The boy was pointing. His face screwed up in concentration, and from his fingers, a web of biological light, a hologene, was projecting onto the floor. It was a perfect, shimmering, 3-dimensional lie. The Rhodian was not the only one who saw it. The lead human stepped in. "What is that?" From deeper in the vent, Iria did her part. She did not create a complex image. She created a flash, a single, focused, blinding pulse of violet light, aimed directly at their faces. It was the light of a small star. The hunters screamed, dropping their hands to their eyes. Their night vision visors whited out, frying the sensors. "Now," Jackson said. He slammed his fist onto the main breaker. He did not channel the station's power. That was messy. Instead, he discharged the entire capacitor bank he had just wired into a closed loop with the conductive sealant and the spare cable, all of which was now attached to the metal floor plates. It was not a shock. It was a magnet. A massive, industrial-grade electromagnet. There was a sound like God slamming a door. Every piece of ferrous metal in the junction, 4 blasters, 2 combat knives, the spare ammunition clips. The heavy plates of their armor flew from their bodies and slammed onto the floor panels with enough force to crack the concrete. The four bounty hunters, suddenly stripped of their weapons and half their armor, were left standing in their thermal undersuits, blinking, blind, and utterly disarmed. Jackson stepped out of the shadows, his heavy diagnostic wrench in his hand. He did not hit them. He just walked past them, to the ventilation shaft. "Come on," he said. Arya and Kale scrambled out, their eyes wide. They looked at the disoriented, groaning hunters. You did not kill them," Kale said, sounding surprised. "Death is easy," Jackson said, grabbing their hands. "Fixing things is hard. I am a mechanic. Now, run." They ran. They did not stop running for an hour. They used cargo lifts, garbage chutes, and pressurized equalization tubes. Jackson's knowledge of the station was a map, and he was leading them through the margins. But as they ran, the station itself turned against them. Every screen they passed, every public address speaker, every comms unit flared to life. Archon Sable's face was on everyone. He was handsome, in a severe, glacial way. His black, uniform-like suit was immaculate. He stood in what looked like the command deck of a warship. "Citizens of Spindlehaven." His voice was a velvet hammer, resonating with cold authority. Earlier today, a known fugitive and terrorist, Jackson Reed, abducted the two surviving heirs of the Aurelian Empire. A picture of Jackson flashed on the screen, a grainy, 5-year-old security still from his arrival at the station. He looked tired and gray. "The Regency Council has authorized any and all means to retrieve the children. The bounty has been raised. 50 million standards for the children, unharmed. An additional 10 million for the confirmed death of the kidnapper." The station exploded. Jackson could feel it. A shift in the air pressure. The distant sound of alarms. The sudden, frantic shouts in the corridors. They were not just being hunted by professionals anymore. They were being hunted by everyone. They finally burst out into a cavernous, dark space. The air was cold and thin. It was a decommissioned docking bay. Bay 94. One that had been sealed for 2 decades after a quarantine breach. Jackson knew it because he, and he alone, had been siphoning power from its still active conduits. "We cannot stay on the station," Jackson panted, leaning against a cargo container. "We are out of tunnels. We are out of time." Arya was shivering, the cold of the bay seeping into her thin clothes. Jackson shrugged off his heavy overshirt and wrapped it around her. She buried her face in it. Kale was just watching him, his expression unreadable. Jackson pulled out his datapad. He had one last call to make, a call he had sworn he would never, ever make again. He typed in a code, an old, forgotten set of coordinates that served as a private comms key. He waited. "This had better be good, Jax." A woman's voice answered, sharp and clear. "No video?" Or "Goodbye, this frequency is dead." Jackson let out a breath he had been holding for 5 years. "Celine, I need a pickup." Silence. For a long, long time. "No," the voice said. "Celine, listen to me." "I am listening." "I am listening to Jackson Reed, the best damn zero-G shipwright and propulsion tech in the Outer Rim. The man who could tune a drive by listening to it. The man who vanished after and now he's a ghost calling on a dead channel from a station that is currently screaming about a 50 million standard kidnapping. You have got to be the unluckiest man I have ever known." "Celine, please," Jackson said, and he hated the desperation in his own voice. "It is not what it looks like. I did not kidnap them. So you are just babysitting the 2 most valuable children in the galaxy for fun. It is complicated. Complicated is what you do. Jax, you were always a walking temporal paradox. Where are you? Bay 94. Decommissioned. The outer doors are slagged, but the internal mechanisms are fine. I... I fixed them. Last year. Of course you did. Celine sighed. The sound was full of static and 5 years of unspoken history. You always did hate a broken machine. Stay put. If you are there, I will find you. If Sable finds you first. It was nice knowing you. Mostly. The connection died. Jackson stared at the datapad. She is coming. You trust her? Cale asked, his small hand resting on Jackson's arm. The sigil on his neck was pulsing brighter. Jackson felt a strange, tingling warmth where the boy's hand touched him. A feedback loop through the child's sigil. It was jamming the station-wide broadcast on his datapad. The image of Sable flickered and died. Jackson looked at the boy, then at the datapad. The sigils, they are interfering with the signal. You are warm, Cale said simply. It makes them strong. When you are close, the noise in the system gets quiet and the sigils get loud. Jackson understood. Proximity to him was amplifying their abilities, turning them from passive markers into active transmitters. They were broadcasting a signal of their own, one that was confusing the sensors looking for them. I am the anchor. Jackson finally truly believed it. I do not trust her, Jackson said, answering Cale's question. But she is the best pilot I have ever seen, and she has principles. She is a thief, not a killer. A deep groan, the sound of metal moving on metal for the first time in 20 years, echoed through the bay. Jackson looked up. The massive, sealed blast doors that led to the vacuum of space were shuddering. A sleek, dark, angular freighter. A ship that looked more like a weapon than a transport. Slowly uncloaked, its silhouette appearing against the starfield. It was the Starlight's alibi. The ship maneuvered with impossible grace, its engines burning cold blue, and settled onto the docking clamps. The main ramp hissed and lowered. A woman stood at the top, silhouetted in the light from her own ship. She was wearing a pilot's pressure suit, a blaster strapped to her thigh. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, practical knot. Celine Park. She looked exactly the same, and completely different. Jackson Reed, she said, her voice echoing in the vast bay. She walked down the ramp, her boots clicking on the metal. She stopped 10 feet away. You look like hell. Good to see you too, Celine, Jackson said. He pushed the children slightly behind him. Celine's eyes, sharp and intelligent, flicked to Iria and Cale. Her amused, cynical expression faltered. Just for a second. My God, Jax. The rumors are true. They are. They are real. They are real, Jackson said. And they need to leave. Now. I will pay you. I have credits. Celine laughed. It was a short, bitter sound. Credits. You think this is a credit problem. This is an Archon Sable is pointing a fleet at this entire sector problem. This is a Regency Council rewriting the law of the galaxy problem. I am a smuggler, Jackson. I smuggle rare wines and banned art. I do not smuggle political apocalypses. Celine, Jackson said, stepping forward. They are just children. They are not, Celine snapped, her hand dropping to her blaster. They are the heirs to the Empire and... You. What are you? Their bodyguard, their dad. The word hung in the cold air. Jackson's datapad, still in his hand, pinged, a high priority, encrypted call. It was Dr. Hale. It is Hale, Jackson said to Celine. Put it on your ship's internal comms. Secure line. You need to hear this. Celine stared at him, her eyes searching his. Finally, she nodded. My ship. My rules. Get on board. All of you. You so much as touch a console without my permission, and I will space you, gently. They hurried up the ramp. The inside of the Alibi was as clean and precise as the outside. It smelled of ozone and scrubbed metal. On speaker, Celine ordered, hitting a console. Dr. Hale's voice filled the cockpit. Jackson, thank the stars. I thought you were dead. The station is. It is a war zone. I am routing this through a deep space probe. Listen. I finished the analysis on the scans you sent. Go ahead, Doctor, Jackson said, his eyes on Celine. The resonance is off the charts. It is not just a passive marker. The proximity of the anchor you. Jackson is acting as an amplifier. The children's abilities. The hologene. It is coming online. The sigils are now emitting a low-level biological frequency that is, as far as I can tell, jamming high-resolution scanners. Celine, who had been listening with a bored expression, suddenly looked very interested. Jamming? What kind of jamming? Who is this? Hale demanded. A friend, Jackson said. Celine Park, Captain. A Park? Oh dear, Hale muttered. Fine. Captain Park, the frequency is unique. It mimics background radiation. But it is patterned. It is making the children, and by proximity, the anchor, look like a hole in the sensor grid. It is confusing the hell out of the station's tracking net. But it is getting stronger. The more time he spends with them, the louder the signal gets. They are a living, breathing counter-surveillance system. Wonderful, Celine said, her fingers flying over her console. My ship loves holes in the sensor grid. That is not all, Hale said, his voice grim. I accessed the restricted historical archives. The Regency Council's charter is explicit. It is temporary, pending the return of the Empress or the ascension of the heirs. The Ascension Centennial is in 3 months. If Iria and Kale are presented to the Imperial Senate, the Regency is over. Cauldron, the Prime Regent, his power, all of it, just evaporates. This is not a retrieval, Jackson. It is a purge. He wants them, yes. He needs them to legitimize his new permanent rule. But he needs them controlled, or dead. The ship's external comms crackled. It was Sable's voice, now broadcasting on all frequencies. Jackson Reed, your identity is a lie. You are no mechanic. You are a known associate of the traitor. Warden Prime. A name, I am sure, you have not heard in a very long time. Surrender the children, and perhaps we will discuss your past. Jackson froze. The name, Warden Prime. It felt like a punch, an echo of the promise, the splinter in his mind. Celine was staring at him, her face pale. Jackson, she whispered. What did he call you? Jackson looked at her, and in his own eyes, he saw the reflection of a stranger. The fog in his mind was swirling, thick and suffocating. I do not know, he said. Celine's expression hardened. She hit a series of controls. The Starlight's Alibi shuddered, its engines roaring to life, the force throwing Jackson and the children into the crash seats. I am tripling my fee, Celine said, her eyes on the navigation console, as the ship blasted out of the docking bay, the old doors buckling under the thrust. You are paying for the fuel, the risk, and the new paint job this is going to cost me. She looked back at Jackson, her eyes holding his. The ship dodged a piece of station debris, and for a moment, they were suspended in the black, the starfield a dizzying backdrop. Anne Jackson, she said, her voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. You were always a terrible liar. Just a mechanic. I never bought it. Not for a second. The ship vanished into hyperlight, leaving Spindlehaven and Archon Sable's closing fleet behind in the silence. The Starlight's alibi was a whisper in the void. Celine Park's ship was a magnificent lie, its sensor profile matching a defunct asteroid mining drone, while its custom-built drive, which Jackson recognized with a mechanic's awe as a heavily modified, illegal, military-grade rig, propelled them at speeds that bent the very fabric of known space. They had been in hyperlight for 3 days. Jackson, Iria, and Kale were quartered in a small, sterile cargo hold that Celine had converted into a passenger bay. It was clean, pressurized, and had nutrient dispensers. It was, by Spindlehaven standards, a palace. The children had recovered from their initial terror with a resilience that astounded Jackson. The moment they were safe, they had collapsed, sleeping for 20 hours straight, a deep, restorative sleep that spoke of months on the run. When they awoke, they were different. The small, terrified refugees were replaced by children. Curious, intelligent, sharp-witted children who happened to be the heirs to an empire. Iria, the elder at 8, had appointed herself Celine's shadow. She would sit in the co-pilot's chair, her small legs dangling, watching the blur of hyperlight with an intense, analytical gaze. Kale, at 7, had discovered Jackson's tool bag. Jackson had found him, not in the bay, but in a maintenance crawlspace, his small hands expertly rewiring a secondary power coupling. Jackson hadn't been angry. He had been impressed. He had sat with the boy, and in the quiet hum of the alibi's engines, he had shown him how to properly strip and seal a high-voltage wire. "You are good at this," Kale had said, his voice soft. "Your hands are quiet." "Quiet hands are good for small machines," Jackson had replied, the first easy words he had spoken in years. Now, Jackson was in the ship's small medbay, watching a holographic display. Dr. Orrin Hale's face was sharp and clear, his signal now routed securely through Celine's encrypted comms network. Celine herself was leaning against the bulkhead, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. "The full genetic sequence is... It is unlike anything I have ever seen," Dr. Hale said, his voice crackling with academic excitement. He had been running the advanced, long-range scans Celine's medbay had taken of all 3 of them. "Jackson, your genetic markers are not just human. They are archaic. You possess a dormant gene-psychic link sequence that, frankly, should not exist. It is a 1 in a billion anomaly, or 1 in a trillion." "Get to the point, Doctor," Celine said, her voice sharp. "We are burning fuel and time." "What does the magic gene do?" Dr. Hale shot her a disapproving look. "It is not magic, Captain Park. It is biology. The children, Iria and Kale, possess the lock. It is the hologene, the royal signet. But Jackson is the key." "Us. His anomalous sequence is a perfect 100% match for their psychic resonance pattern. It is not just a legal designation, this anchor business. It is a literal, physical, and psychic bond. They are a system, and he is the power source." "So, what does this system do?" Jackson asked. He felt cold. He was not a man. He was a component, a power source. "Right now," Hale said, "it is saving your lives. Their proximity to you, their key, is amplifying their hologene abilities." "The scanner jamming we detected." "It is not just jamming, it is erasing. Your combined resonance signatures create a localized null field to any standard sensor. You, the children, and the ship. You simply do not exist. You are a hole in the universe. Celine's expression changed. A slow, appreciative smile touched her lips. A hole in the universe. I like that, Doctor. That is... that is good for business. It is not a cloaking device, Captain, Hale snapped. It is a biological defense mechanism, and it will not stop a visual scan or a determined hunt. Which brings me to the problem. Sable is not just hunting you. He is hunting for you. He is sweeping the entire outer rim with trawlers. Ships designed to detect precisely this kind of null field anomaly. He knows what you are, even if he does not know where. So we are a moving target, Jackson said, rubbing his temples. The fog in his mind was thick today. That name, Warden Prime, echoing in it like a funeral bell. We cannot run forever. We need a place. We need allies. You need leverage, Celine corrected him. You need to change the game. Right now. You are assets. You need to become heirs. And how do we do that? Jackson asked. You need the law, Dr. Hale said, his face grim. The Regency Council is operating in a gray area. They claim they are protecting the children by hunting them. You need to prove, legally and publicly, that their actions are a violation. You need to find the rule book. What rule book? The Codex of Crowns, Hale said. It is the foundational document of the Aurelian Empire, the original compact. It contains all the succession rituals, the laws of regency, and, most importantly, the entire legal framework for the Anchor Protocol. It is the only thing in the galaxy that supersedes the Regency Council's authority. Great, Jackson said. Where is it, the Imperial Palace Archives? No, Hale said. The Palace Archives were sanitized after the Empress vanished. The Codex is not a single document. It is a living record, maintained for 1,000 years by an independent order, the Shard Monastery, on the planetoid Kyrian. Celine, who had been listening with casual interest, suddenly went rigid. No, she said, her voice flat. Absolutely not. What is it? Jackson asked. Kyrian is not on the fringe. Jackson. It is in the void sector. It is a graveyard, a navigational nightmare of asteroids, rogue comets, and dead stars. It is where ships go to die. The Shard Monastery is a myth, a bedtime story for paranoid historians. It is real, Dr. Hale insisted. I am sending you the coordinates now. It is shielded from long-range sensors, but the coordinates are ancient. They are sound. Sound coordinates do not mean anything when you are flying through a nebula that eats ships, Celine retorted. We will be torn apart before we get within 1,000,000 kilometers. You are the best pilot I have ever seen, Jackson said quietly. Celine turned to him, her eyes flashing. Do not do that. Do not use that on me. Use what I am stating a fact, Jackson said. You can fly this ship. I can keep the engines tuned. We can do this. Why? Celine shot back. Why you? Why do you even care a week ago? You were hiding in a maintenance tunnel, content to be nobody. Now you are ready to fly into a meat grinder for 2 children you just met. And for a past that you claim you cannot even remember. Because... Jackson's voice faltered. He looked at the floor. The fog in his mind was swirling with images. Fire. Metal. A promise. Because I do not remember, but I feel it. I feel that promise. And it is connected to them. This Warden Prime. It means something. Even if I do not know what. If I run now, I will be running forever. He looked up, his eyes meeting hers. I am tired of running, Celine. Celine stared at him, the silence in the medbay stretching thin. The tension between them was a tangible thing, a high-voltage current. "You are an idiot, Jackson Reed," she finally whispered. "You always were." She walked out of the medbay. Jackson heard her voice from the cockpit, sharp and clear. "Strap in, Doctor. We are changing course. And send me that data. If I am going to fly into hell, I want the latest map." Jackson let out a long breath. He looked at Dr. Hale's fading image. "Thank you, Doctor." "Do not thank me," Hale said. "Just survive. And Jackson, be careful. The past you are digging for. You might not like what you find." The connection cut. The journey to Kyrian was 3 days of pure, unadulterated hell. Celine was not exaggerating. The void sector was a cosmic blender. The alibi was buffeted by gravimetric shears, pelted by microasteroids, and navigating through a thick, charged nebula that played havoc with their sensors. Jackson was in the engine room for the entire duration, living on caffeine and sheer willpower. He was not just a mechanic, he was a surgeon, performing constant, delicate bypasses, rerouting power, and physically bracing core components that were rattling themselves to pieces. He worked with a focused, almost transcendent grace. And for the first time, he let himself feel the ship. He let his senses expand, touching the energy fields, the thrum of the drive core. He felt a hum, a resonance deep within himself, the same resonance he felt near the children. He found he could anticipate failures, sensing a weak energy flow before a console sparked. He was not just fixing the ship, he was communing with it. He sealed a plasma conduit, his hands moving with uncanny speed, and paused. He held his hand over the humming line. He concentrated. He focused on the energy, the subatomic particles flowing within. He willed it to steady. The diagnostic on the console next to him, which had been fluctuating by 2%, suddenly flatlined. A perfect, steady, 100% flow. He pulled his hand back, his heart hammering. I can control micromatter. I can control energy fields. The knowledge was terrifying. It was a power he had no context for, no memory of. He thought of the children sleeping just a few decks above him. He thought of what a man with that power could do. What he could have done. He pushed the thought down. He sealed the panel. He was a mechanic. He fixed things. That was all. He could not be anything more. It was too dangerous. When the alibi finally broke through the nebula, it was scarred, rattling, and running on 30% power. But it was in one piece. Before them, floating in the black, was the Shard Monastery. It was an impossible structure. A single, colossal shard of black, crystalline rock, easily 500 kilometers long, jutting out of a shattered planetoid. A city of small, glowing structures, like barnacles, clung to its sides. It was dark, silent, and ancient. "They are hailing us," Celine said from the cockpit, her voice tight with exhaustion. "Standard identification, no military codes. They are welcoming us." A single, small docking bay opened on the surface, a beacon of light in the dark. Celine guided the alibi in with a pilot's final, weary prayer. The moment the ramp lowered, the air was different. It was clean. It smelled of ozone, but also of incense and old stone. They were greeted not by soldiers, but by silent, robed figures. Their leader was a woman, ancient and timeless. She was tall, her face a mask of serene wrinkles, her eyes a startling, bright silver. She introduced herself as Abbess Nix, holder of the Codex, keeper of the record. She looked at Jackson, then at Celine. but her gaze lingered, with a profound, aching sadness, on Iria and Kale. "We have been waiting," Abbess Nix said, her voice like the rustle of old parchment. "The record is open. It has been for a very long time." She led them through corridors of living rock to a vast central chamber. In the center, suspended in a low-gravity field, was the Codex of Crowns. It was not a book. It was a spiraling, miles-long data crystal, pulsing with a soft, internal light. "It is all here," Nix said. "The history of the blood, the laws of the Empire, all of it, unsanitized." "We need the Anchor Protocol," Jackson said. "We need to know the law." "The law is clear," Nix said, her silver eyes finding his. Article 4, Section 1. Upon the recognition of an anchor by a child of the blood, that bond is deemed sacred and inviolate. The law does not just permit the bond. Anchor read. It demands it. She turned, her robes sweeping the floor. The law states that the Regency Council, upon confirmation of such a bond, has one duty, and one duty only, to protect the anchor and the heirs, and to cede all guardianship to the anchor, until such time as the heirs come of age. The weight of her words settled on Jackson. So, the hunt, the bounty, the soldiers. It is all illegal. "It is high treason," Nix confirmed, her voice cold. "A violation of the Codex itself." "Then why are they doing it?" Celine asked, her practical nature cutting through the ancient reverence. "Why risk a treason charge?" "Because," Nix said, a deep sadness in her voice, "they believe no one is left who knows the law, or who has the power to enforce it." She led them to a different part of the chamber, a wall etched with names. The old court, the imperial tutors, the legal scholars, the members of the Empress's personal guard. Her eyes seemed to flick to Celine for just a moment. "All gone, vanished in the 5 years since the Empress disappeared. A systematic purge. Anyone who knew the rituals, anyone who could challenge the Regency's temporary mandate, they were silenced." "Sable," Jackson said. "Archon Sable was the instrument," Nix agreed. "But the hand that wields him belongs to Prime Regent Caldron. He seeks to break the line, to erase the past, so he can be the only future." A silence filled the room, heavy and absolute. "So," Celine said, her voice suddenly, shockingly light, "we are in a monastery full of priceless, ancient secrets, with a death sentence on our heads, and the only people who can help us are, well, dead." She looked at Iria, who had been listening with solemn intensity. "This is a terrible vacation." Iria, who had barely smiled since they met, suddenly giggled. It was a small, bright sound in the ancient stone hall. She walked over to Celine. "You are funny," Iria said. "You are not like the other guards. You are Captain Mom." Celine's cynical mask cracked. She looked, for a second, completely undone. She awkwardly patted Iria on the head. "Right, Captain Mom. Sure. Let's not make that a thing." But the name stuck, and the ice around Celine's heart, the ice she had cultivated for 5 years, began to crack. Kale, meanwhile, was at Jackson's side. He was not looking at the crystal. He was looking at a loose maintenance panel at the base of the platform. "The resonance field is unstable," Kale whispered, pointing. "The power feed is... it is dirty." Jackson looked at the panel, then at the boy. He knelt. "Show me." And there, in the heart of the Shard Monastery, surrounded by the ghosts of an empire, A mechanic and his 7-year-old apprentice got to work, their quiet discussion of capacitors and power flow a strange, new, and powerful counterpoint to the ancient law. A makeshift family, a broken mechanic, a cynical pilot, and 2 children who were the key to the galaxy. The peace lasted for less than a day. An alarm, a sound the monastery had not heard in a century, suddenly blared. A deep, resonating chime of warning. Abbess Nix's serene face tightened. "They have found us." Jackson and Celine ran to the main viewport. At first, they saw nothing, just the black, debris-filled expanse of the void sector. "There," Selene whispered, her pilot's eyes sharp. She pointed to a patch of blackness that was too black. Ship decloaked. It was not a trawler. It was a fleet. A dozen sleek, black cruisers, their weapon ports glowing with ready power. They were blocking the only exit. And on the comms, a new mandate from the Regency Council was being broadcast on all channels. Overriding all local frequencies, Prime Regent Cauldron himself, his face severe and political, stared out at them. "By the authority of the Regency Council, the royal assets have been located. Any individual group or sovereign entity found to be harboring these assets will be declared traitors to the Empire. The Shard Monastery, by its refusal to comply, is hereby designated a hostile entity. Surrender the assets and the terrorist Jackson Reed, or face summary judgment." The message was clear. There was no more gray area. There was no more law. There was only power. Jackson watched the ships maneuver into a blockade. He felt the familiar, cold dread. But beneath it, he felt something else. A hum. The resonance. He felt the energy of the monastery's own power core. A massive, ancient thing, deep beneath their feet. He felt his own power, that terrifying, forgotten ability thrumming in his hands. He could fight. He could probably win. He could feel the metal of those ships, the energy in their weapon systems. He could unmake them. He imagined it. The ships tearing themselves apart, the fire, the explosions, the vacuum. And he saw Iria and Kale watching him. He clenched his fists, forcing the power down. He would not become a monster to save them. He would not win a war by becoming the thing they were running from. "They are not firing," Selena said, her voice tight. "All business." "It is a blockade. They are waiting. Why?" A single, elegant, chrome-plated shuttle detached from the flagship. It was broadcasting a diplomatic frequency. "He is coming," Abbess Nix said, joining them. "Who?" Jackson asked. "The Archon," she said. "Archon Sable. He has requested a parley." The main chamber of the Shard Monastery was designed for peace, not for war. It was a place of echoes, stone, and ancient, reverent silence. That silence was now being violated by the crisp, measured bootfalls of Archon Sable. He entered not as a warrior, but as a magistrate. He was flanked by 4 guards. Not the black-armored soldiers from Spindlehaven, but a different breed. They wore elegant, form-fitting chrome armor that hummed with the faint, blue light of personal energy shields. They were his personal guard, his Justicars. And they moved with the lethal grace of synchronized predators. Sable himself was immaculate. His black, judicial-style tunic was uncreased. His face was calm, severe, and almost beautiful in its cold symmetry. He stopped in the center of the vast hall, his gaze sweeping over Abbess Nix, Selene Park, and finally, Jackson Reed. He held up a small, holographic projector. "Jackson Reed," Sable began, his voice a perfect, unfeeling baritone that carried in the acoustics of the hall. "Born nowhere, Citizen, nowhere. A ghost, a drifter, a mechanic, with a list of petty infractions across a dozen systems. An image flickered to life above his hand. It was Jackson, grainy and gray, from the Spindle Haven security feed. You are also, Sable continued, a known trafficker. The image changed. It showed Jackson in the bar, a still frame, but subtly altered. The light was more sinister. The children at his feet looked less like they were clinging to him, and more like they were being held by him. This is not a negotiation, Anchor Reed, Sable said, using the name as an insult. This is a retrieval. You were found in possession of stolen, high-value Imperial assets. You resisted retrieval with lethal force. You fled custody. You allied with a known smuggler. He nodded curtly at Celine, who bared her teeth. And you have taken refuge with a rogue, unsanctioned religious order. He gestured to Abbess Nix, who did not flinch. The Regency Council's mandate is clear. The children are to be returned. You are to be taken into custody to face charges of kidnapping, terrorism, and treason. Jackson looked at the faked images. He felt the cold, familiar dread. This was a legal execution, wrapped in the robes of due process. He is lying. Iria's small voice piped up. She and Cale stood half-hidden behind Jackson, clinging to his trousers. He is the one with the soldiers. He is the bad man. Children say what they are taught, Sable said, his voice laced with false pity. And you, Jackson Reed, have had them for many days, long enough to teach them anything. Jackson was silent. He looked at Sable. He looked at Selene, who had her hand on her blaster, her knuckles white. He looked at Abbess Nix. You quote the Regency Council's mandate, Jackson said, his voice surprisingly clear in the hall. But you stand in a hall that predates the Council by 1,000 years. You stand before the Codex of Crowns. Sable's perfectly sculpted eyebrow twitched. The Codex is a historical artifact. The Council's mandate is the law. The Codex is the law, Abbess Nix said, stepping forward, her voice resonating with an authority Sable's lacked. And it describes, in perfect detail, the procedure for this exact, impossible circumstance. A procedure? Sable asked, a hint of a sneer in his voice. You claim he is a fraud, Jackson said, his mind racing, piecing together the fragments Nix had explained to him. You claim the bond is a lie. I claim it is real. The Codex provides a way to settle this, not with soldiers, but with truth. He stepped away from the children, into the center of the hall. I demand the trial of the sigil. A heavy silence fell. The chrome-plated Justicars shifted, their shields flaring. Selene looked at Jackson like he was insane. Sable laughed. It was not a warm sound. It was a short, sharp bark of disbelief. The trial of the sigil. Are you a fool that is ritual, not law? It is a myth, a superstition. It is Article 5, Section 2. Nix corrected him, her voice like ice. The confirmation of the sacred bond. It is a public ritual, a test of truth. If the bond is false, the anchor is declared a traitor, and the children are wards of the state. But if it is true, Jackson picked up the thread, his voice hardening. If it is true, the bond is declared sacred, the anchor is confirmed, and the Regency Council loses all authority over the children, their hunt, their mandate, their entire claim, becomes high treason. Sable's smile vanished. He saw the trap. Jackson had not argued the faked evidence. He had changed the entire court, from Sable's military tribunal to the ancient law of the Empire. You cannot be serious, Sable said. This monastery is broadcasting this parley, on an open, archival channel. Celine suddenly interjected, tapping her own datapad. A little insurance policy from the Abyss. There are, at least 500,000 subscribers in the fringe systems listening in. Archon. They love this kind of ancient drama. Sable's eyes darted to Celine, then to Nyx. He was trapped. If he refused the ancient public ritual, it would be seen as an admission that he feared the outcome. It would prove he was a tyrant, not a judge. He cannot be the anchor, Sable muttered, more to himself than anyone. He is a human. A drifter. The line is pure. The resonance would be impossible. His confidence returned, settling on him like a cloak. He saw the new path. He would let Jackson perform this ridiculous, ancient ritual. It would fail, spectacularly, and it would fail publicly. Jackson would be exposed as a fraud, the monastery as charlatans, and Sable's own actions would be vindicated. Very well, Archon Sable said, his voice once again the smooth, velvet hammer. Let the Mythkeepers have their ceremony. We will have this truth, here and now, and when it fails, I will take the children, and I will take you. The ritual requires witnesses, Abbess Nyx said. She gestured, and from the shadowy cloisters, 24 monks emerged, their faces solemn. They began to chant, a low, resonating thrum that seemed to make the very air shiver. Jackson, Celine whispered, grabbing his arm. What are you doing? This is a trick. He is going to kill us all. It is not a trick, Celine, Jackson whispered back, his heart pounding. I think this is what I am for. Stand in the center, Abbess Nyx instructed, pointing to a circle of inlaid metal on the stone floor. Bring the children, Jackson nodded. He walked to the circle. Iria, Kyle, come on. It is okay. The children, no longer afraid, walked to him. Their faces were set with a strange, solemn purpose. They stood in the circle, taking his hands. The bond is of mind, body, and spirit, Nyx declared, her voice rising above the chant. The Codex demands proof. Let the sigil speak. Let the anchor be known. The moment her words finished, it began. It was not a glow. It was an ignition. The sigils on Iria's hand and Kale's neck exploded with light. Not the soft, holographic pulse, but a blinding, golden fire. The light was so bright it cast sharp, dancing shadows from the great pillars. A wind, sudden and impossible, roared through the sealed chamber. It was not air. It was a pressure wave, a field of pure energy, originating from the three of them. Jackson cried out. It was not pain. It was power. The thrum in his bones, the resonance he had been suppressing, the very ability he had sworn not to use, was being pulled from him. He felt the connection to Iria and Kale, not as an idea, but as a physical circuit. He was the battery. They were the conduits, and the monastery was the amplifier. Anchor Reed, Nyx, shouted over the howling energy. You must hold the bond, do not fight it, guide it. But Jackson was fighting it. He was fighting to keep it in. He felt the atoms in the stone floor, the metal in the walls, the very air in the room, all listening to him, waiting for a command. He saw the molecular structure of the universe, a vast, beautiful, terrifying machine, and his hands were on the controls. The effort to not unmake reality was overwhelming. Dust rose from the floor, not in a cloud, but in perfect, spinning, geometric spirals. Small stones lifted from the ground, orbiting the three of them in concentric, harmonious rings. The ancient, inlaid metal of the circle on the floor began to glow, not with heat, but with a cold, silver light, as its very structure was temporarily reordered by the psychic field. Jackson was on his knees, his teeth gritted, sweat pouring from his face. He was a dam holding back an ocean, and he was breaking. It is beautiful," one of the younger monks breathed, watching the display. Archon Sable watched, his face no longer calm, but a mask of horrified, furious disbelief. This was not a failed ritual. This was real. The very thing he had been sent to acquire. The power the Regency Council wanted to control was manifesting, and it was bonding itself to this nobody. Abbess Nix raised her hands, her face illuminated by the golden light. "The bond is confirmed, the Codex. The Codex finds in favor." Sable had seen enough. He would not let this stand. He would not let this truth be spoken. He gave a single, silent signal, a tap on his wristcom. High above, in the darkened arches of the ceiling, hidden panels slid open. 4 sniper teams, pre-placed during Sable's diplomatic arrival, took aim. Their orders were simple. Not Jackson. Not yet. The children. Sable betrayed the parley. 4 red laser sights converged, not on Jackson, but on Iria's chest. "No," Celine screamed, seeing the glint of light, drawing her own blaster, but she was too late. The first plasma bolt, a searing blue-white lance of energy, ripped through the air. Time, for Jackson, broke. The agony of his restraint, the howling wind, the orbiting stones, the fog in his mind, the fear, the promise. It all vanished. It was replaced by a single, cold, perfect, and absolute clarity. He did not move. He did not have to. He was on his knees, head bowed, but he looked at the plasma bolt. It stopped. It just stopped. It hung in the air, a foot from Miria's face, sizzling, snarling, held in a stasis field of Jackson's pure, unleashed will. The hall went silent. The chanting stopped. The wind died. Jackson raised his head. His eyes were no longer the eyes of a tired mechanic. They were the eyes of something else, something ancient and powerful. With a flick of his gaze, the plasma bolt bent, curved in a 90-degree angle, and shot straight up, harmlessly impacting the ceiling in a shower of stone. "What?" one of the snipers whispered. His voice caught on the open comm. Jackson stood up. Kale and Iria, their sigils now burning like twin suns, did not move from his side. He raised his right hand, high above, the 4 sniper rifles. Twisted, the metal groaned, bent, and then, with a sound like a giant's knuckles cracking, the stocks, barrels, and firing mechanisms fused into solid, useless lumps of scrap. "He has no weapon," Sable whispered, taking a step back. His 4 Justicars, his elite, chrome-plated guards, reacted. They charged Jackson, their energy shields flaring, their hands reaching for their sidearms. Jackson stomped his foot. He did not touch them. He touched the floor, the ancient, stone floor of the monastery, the one he had been feeling ever since he arrived. The stone liquefied, not with heat, but with resonant energy. It flowed up the Justicar's legs, like thick, gray water, in the split second before their shields could react to a non-energy-based attack. And then, Jackson willed it to be hard. The stone re-solidified. The 4 elite guards were frozen in place, encased from the waist down in solid, newly formed rock. They were alive. They were unharmed. They were, however, completely and utterly neutralized. Jackson turned his full attention to Archon Sable. Sable, to his credit, was a professional. He did not freeze. He snarled, drew his own heavy-calibered plasma pistol, and emptied the entire clip at Jackson's chest. Jackson just walked. One by one, the plasma bolts hit an unseen kinetic barrier 3 inches from his chest, splattering like paintballs, their energy harmlessly dispersed. He did not even break stride. He walked until he was standing face to face with the Archon, close enough to see the man's pupils dilate in genuine, abject terror. Sable fumbled to reload, his hands shaking. Jackson raised his hand, and the pistol was pulled from Sable's grip. It flew into Jackson's hand. He did not point it at Sable. He looked at it, and, with a simple clench of his fist, the weapon crushed itself into a ball of metal and circuitry. He dropped it, letting it fall to the floor with a heavy thud. The revenge, the rage, it was there. He could end this. He could end him. He could kill this man who had ordered the murder of children. But he saw Iria and Kale, watching him. He was a mechanic. He fixed things. He did not break them. Not this way. He spared the men who had kneeled, who were trapped, who were disarmed. He turned from Sable, who was panting, disarmed, and defeated. Jackson walked to the wall, a large, metal-reinforced bulkhead. He placed his hand on it. He did not touch the metal plating itself. He reached for it. A large, 4-foot by 4-foot sheet of steel plating ripped free from the wall, floating in the air beside him. With a gesture, he willed the words into existence. He did not use a tool. He used his mind. The metal bent, creased, and formed, as if an invisible, giant chisel was carving into it. 4 words, in stark, deep, imperial letters. No one touches the children. With a final, contemptuous push, the steel tablet flew across the room and embedded itself deep in the stone wall. A new commandment, a new law, written not by a council, but by an anchor. "Get out," Jackson said, his voice a low, mechanical growl. "Tell Cauldron what you saw. Tell him the anchor is here, and he is awake." Sable stared at the metal tablet. He looked at his men, trapped in stone. He looked at Jackson, a man radiating a power he had only read about in forbidden texts. He had lost. He had lost the children. He had lost his troops. He had lost his dignity. But he was still a soldier. "This is not over." "Warden," Sable hissed, his voice venomous, using the old, forgotten title. "Cauldron's mandate is absolute. I will return. I will return with an army of machines. An army that cannot be tricked by your ahistorical parlor games." To cover his retreat, Sable did the last thing he could. He threw a single, high-yield flashbang grenade at Jackson's feet. Jackson, his power still flaring, simply created a kinetic bubble around himself and the children. The grenade detonated, a blinding flash and a deafening roar that rocked the hall. When the smoke cleared, Sable was gone, wounded, not by Jackson, but by a piece of shrapnel from his own grenade that had ricocheted off Jackson's shield. He had fled back to his shuttle. The hall was silent. The only sound was the groaning of the monks, tending to the few who had been hit in the initial, treacherous volley. Jackson's power receded. The high, the clarity, the rage. It all drained away, leaving him empty. He swayed on his feet. The fog, his old, familiar gray companion, rushing back into his mind. He collapsed. He did not hit the floor. Celine was there. She caught him, her arms wrapping around him, her small frame somehow supporting his weight. She was shaking. He looked up at her, his vision blurring. "You," she breathed, her voice a strange, choked sound, half sob, half laugh. You You magnificent, terrifying idiot! She did not let him go. She half-dragged, half-carried him to a nearby bench. He saw her datapad, still in her hand. It was recording. Was that... Jackson slurred, his head spinning. Was that live? The monastery's archival feed, Celine said, her voice shaking with adrenaline. It went out. The whole thing. The ritual, the... You, Jackson, the entire fringe, the whole void sector. They just saw a man bend plasma and command stone. They just saw Archon Sable, the Council's monster. Run! Jackson leaned his head back against the cold stone. Good. Let them see. Let Caldron see. He fumbled for his own datapad, trying to check the news feeds. Celine put her hand over his. Just wait a second, Jax, she said. She looked at him, her eyes searching his face, a storm of emotions he could not even begin to name. Awe, anger, and a deep, profound, and terrifying familiarity. It was a look he had not seen in 5 years. You could have been killed, she whispered, her anger winning out. You let him shoot at you. What were you thinking? I was thinking, Jackson murmured, looking at Iria and Kyle, who were now being fussed over by Abbas Nix, that I was tired of fixing broken things. I wanted to build something. A new rule. He looked at the steel tablet, embedded in the wall. No one touches the children. Celine's datapad pinged, a priority alert. She checked it. Well, she said, her voice suddenly, strangely quiet. The galaxy is reacting. The clip is everywhere. They are calling you the Stone Anchor. The folk hero of the fringe. And the council, Jackson asked. What is Caldron's response? Celine looked at the screen, scrolling through the official channels. She looked back at Jackson, her face pale. That is the scary part. Jax, that is the really scary part. What? Nothing, she said. The Regency Council is silent. No denial, no confirmation, no new bounties. Just absolute, deafening silence. The Council's silence lasted exactly 4 days. It was a silence that was not empty, but full. It was the held breath of a predator. The pressurized quiet before a bulkhead implodes. On the 5th day, the Alibi dropped out of hyperlight on a long-range approach to Spindle Haven, and they saw what that silence had built. It was not a fleet. It was a wall. Archon Sable, true to his word, had returned with an army of machines. A blockade of several hundred, perhaps 1,000, unmanned, hunter-killer drones surrounded Spindle Haven. They were sleek, black, and identical, a swarm of perfect, manufactured malice. They were not Imperial Navy. They were private contract, military grade, and utterly remorseless. He did not just follow us, Celine whispered, her hands tightening on the Alibi's controls. The ship was running cold, its null field signature the only thing keeping them from being a smear of plasma. He went home. He went to your home. A system-wide broadcast was playing on a loop. Sable's cold, handsome face filling their screens. The terrorist Jackson Reed and his smuggler accomplice, Celine Park, have been tracked to this sector. By order of the Regency Council. This station is under full quarantine until the assets are surrendered. Any attempt to leave or enter is an act of hostility. Any resistance will be met with sterilization. Jackson watched the swarm. He felt the station's fear, a distant thrum of panic even from this range. Sable was not just hunting him. He was holding 3 million civilians hostage. He cannot get in, Jackson said, his voice flat. Our resonance field. He cannot scan for us. He is just waiting. He is not just waiting, Jax, Celine said, her fingers flying over the sensor displays. He is trawling. Those drones. They are not just looking for a ship. They are looking for the hole. They are looking for us. We stay out here. They will find us. We try to run. They will chase. He has us. No, Jackson said. He looked at the station. The metal calamity he had called home. He knew its weaknesses. He knew its secrets. He has the doors. He does not have the guts. He pointed to a section of the station that was dark, a patch of fused, ancient wreckage from the original colony ships. There, Sector Theta, the old waste heat vents. They are unshielded, unmonitored, and they lead straight to the core. Celine looked at the projected flight path. That is not a vent, Jackson. That is a sewer pipe, 2 kilometers long, and probably half collapsed. But it is not blockaded, Jackson said. You are the only pilot in the galaxy who can make that flight. Celine's expression was a mixture of terror and profound, professional offense. That is not a flight. That is a controlled crash. Fine. Strap yourselves in. Captain Mom is about to do something stupid. The alibi was a ghost. Celine piloted it like a whisper, slipping between the patrol patterns of the hunter-killers. The null field from the children's sigils wrapping the ship in a cloak of non-existence. They slid into the dark, gaping maw of the heat vent, their clearance on either side measured in centimeters. They were not inside the station. They were under it. They half flew, half crashed through the ancient, dark, and forgotten underpinnings of Spindle Haven, finally emerging into a vast, cavernous chamber at the station's absolute center. It was the station heart. It was not a modern reactor. It was the original drive core of the generation ship that had been the first seat of the Haven. It was a Class 0 containment field, a technology so ancient and powerful, it was now considered mythical. It was a semi-stable singularity, held in a web of magnetic fields, pulsing with the slow, deep, terrifying thrum of caged power. It was the lifeblood of the entire 3-million-person station, and Jackson Reed, the mechanic, was the only person alive who knew it was still here. He unstrapped himself, his face grim. Celine, lock the ship down. Keep the kids here. What are you doing, Jax? She asked, her voice low. I am a mechanic, he said, grabbing his tool bag. I am going to fix this. Sable brought an army of machines. I am going to turn them off. How? This core, Jackson said, gesturing to the pulsing heart of energy. It is not just a power source. It is a resonance amplifier. The monastery. The codex. That was a tuning fork. This is the whole orchestra. If I can interface with this, I can project my field, our null field. I can broadcast it. Celine's eyes widened. Broadcast it. How far? Station-wide. Beyond. Enough to hit that entire fleet, Jackson said. It will not hurt them. It is not a weapon. It is a counter-frequency. It is a biological signal. It will overwrite their command code. It will shut them down. All of them. All at once. No shots fired, no lives lost. Jackson? A new voice crackled over the ship's private comm. It was Dr. Orrin Hale, his face appearing on a monitor, his signal routed through a dozen back channels. I have been monitoring the fringe broadcasts. What you are proposing. It is madness. It is the only way, Doctor, Jackson said. You do not understand. Hale's voice was desperate. What you did at the monastery, that was a taste. You were using the monastery's own dampening field as a buffer. This is a raw, unshielded singularity. Jackson, the memory blocks in your mind, the fog you have lived with, that is not an injury. It is a shield. It is a cage you, or someone, built to keep your abilities contained. Hale was trembling. If you interface with that core, you will not just channel its power. It will channel you. It will shatter those mental blocks. It will burn the fog away. The man who wakes up, he will not be just a mechanic. He will be the Warden Prime. And I do not think, after 5 years, he will be a very, gentle man. Jackson looked at the core. He looked at Iria and Kale, who were watching him from the ship's ramp, their faces pale. "He has 3 million people hostage," Jackson said. "This is the only way—" "Jackson, wait!" It was Celine. She had left the cockpit and was walking toward him. Dr. Hale's image vanished as she cut the connection. She stopped in front of him. So close he could see the exhaustion in her eyes. "You are doing it again," she said, her voice a low, furious whisper. "Doing what's saving our lives." "No," she said. "Hiding. Hiding inside a machine. Hiding inside a plan. Hiding behind this duty. You always did this. You always found the biggest, most complicated problem in the room and wrapped your entire self around it, so you did not have to deal with the people." She grabbed his hand. His calloused, mechanic's hand. Her grip was shaking. "Stop! For 1 second, Jackson, stop!" He looked at her, the anger in his mind faltering. "What happens if he is right?" she whispered. "What happens if the fog clears and Jackson is gone? What happens to him?" She nodded toward Kale, who was watching them. His small hands clenched. He just found you. They just found their dad. And I—" She cut herself off, her throat tightening. She looked away, fighting for composure. "I do not want this. Jackson," she said, her voice thick. "I do not want revenge. I do not want to win. I do not want to trade you for the station. I cannot. I will not lose you again." The words hung in the air, heavy and fragile. Again, Jackson felt his own resolve, the cold, hard wall of his plan. Crack. He looked at her, this brilliant, angry, terrified woman who had crossed the galaxy for him. He saw the 5 years of history he could not remember, but she had lived every day of it. He raised his other hand and, for the first time, he touched her face. "This is not revenge. Celine," he said, his voice softer than he thought possible. "And it is not a trade. It is a fix. It is the only fix I have. I am not hiding. I am finally doing what I was built to do." He looked at the core. "But I cannot do it alone." He stepped back and looked at the ancient, sprawling, and broken machinery that connected the core to the station. "The core is willing, but the conduits, they are offline. They are shattered. Decades of neglect. I can channel the power, but I cannot. I cannot send it anywhere. The lines are cut." Salone wiped her eyes, her professionalism slamming back into place. "So, what we cannot fix, 2 kilometers of ancient relays." "No," Jackson said, a cold, thin smile touching his lips. "But we can." He walked to the main station-wide comms panel, a dusty, forgotten thing, and slammed his fist on the activation stud. He took a deep breath. "This is Jackson Reed," his voice, rough and quiet, echoed out. Not on the military channels, but on the local, internal, Maintenance frequency. I am. I am the mechanic from Deck 9. The one Sable is looking for. And he is right. I am here. I am in the station heart. He heard the static of 100,000 hidden listeners. He thinks this station is a prison. He thinks we are his hostages. He is wrong. This is not a prison. This is our home. He looked at the broken relays. He thinks he can break it. He thinks he can turn us against each other, make us afraid. He does not know us. He does not know the people of the Haven. We are not warriors. We are mechanics. We are merchants. We are smugglers. We are survivors. And we do not let our home break. His voice grew stronger. I am in the station heart. I can turn off his army. I can shut down every last one of his machines. But the lines are cut. The relays on Sector Gamma, Sector Delta, and Sector Rho, they are offline. I cannot do it. I cannot do it alone. I need help. He let go of the transmitter. The silence that followed was absolute. Jackson, Celine began. They are terrified. They are not. And then, a new voice, a gravelly, familiar, three-eyed voice crackled over the comm. Reed, is that you? You gray-faced idiot, this is Borvo. You shorted out my bar. You still owe me for that dispenser. Oh, Borvo, Jackson breathed, a laugh, or maybe a sob, catching in his throat. I am on Sector Gamma. Borvo's voice came again, heavy with static. The relays they are slagged, but I have a welder. Get ready. Reed, I am patching it now. Another voice. A hissing, sibilant one. The Crete hunter from the bar. The stone anchor. By the stars. He is in the heart. I am on Deck 10. My crew will hold the entrance. No one will get through. Fix the station, mechanic. One by one, they came. The common folk of Spindlehaven, the merchants, the thieves, the disgruntled pilots, the forgotten maintenance crews. They did not rally to a flag or an empire. They rallied to a mechanic. They rallied to save their home, all across the station in a dozen forgotten sectors. Lights began to flicker. Jackson, Celine said, her voice filled with awe, watching the status board light up. Green. They are fixing it. I know, Jackson said. They are mechanics. It is done, Celine said. After 10 agonizing minutes. The board is green, the network is... It is online, Jackson. The stage is yours. Jackson looked at her. He looked at Iria and Kale, who were now standing just behind him. You have to stay back, he said. All of you, in the ship. It is not going to be safe. Like hell, Celine said, not moving. We are staying in the control room. We are the mechanics. You are the power. We will watch the flow. We will keep you grounded. Jackson looked at her, and for the first time, he did not argue. He nodded. He walked to the center of the chamber, to the raised platform that hung directly over the shimmering, contained singularity. He saw the ancient, hand-shaped contacts, dark and cold. He took a deep breath. He thought of Celine's hand. He thought of Kale's quiet focus. He thought of Iria's fierce, protective eyes. He placed his hands on the contacts. The power of the station heart did not hit him. It welcomed him. It was not a fire. It was an ocean. An ocean of pure, raw, limitless energy, and it flooded his mind. Dr. Hale was right. The fog in his mind. The careful, gray, insulating fog that had protected him for 5 years. It did not just clear. It was incinerated. It was a shatter. A billion shards of memory. Fire. A palace burning. A woman, regal and terrified. The Empress. A promise. A vow. Spoken in a voice he now recognized. His own. Warden Prime. Not a title. A purpose. Celine. Not a smuggler. A guard. Her face. Younger. Not cynical, but full of love. A memory of holding her hand. A child. No, 2 children. A betrayal. Cauldron. The pain. The choice. Wipe it. Wipe it all. Protect them. Forget. Be nobody. The memories hit him. A physical, agonizing weight. He was Jackson Reed. He was the Warden Prime. He was awake. He roared. The resonance wave, focused by his pain, his rage, his memory, his will, blasted out of the core. It was not a chaotic wave. It was a thought. The thought was sleep. In the cold void of space, the hunter-killer fleet, all 1,000 ships, just died. Their engines, their weapons, their command links, all went dark. A fleet of scrap metal, tumbling in the black. Inside the station heart. Jackson collapsed, his hands falling from the contacts. He was on his knees, panting, the world spinning. He was him. He was whole, and it was terrible. Jackson. Celine was running to him. It is done, he panted. The fleet is... The main blast door to the station heart exploded inward. Not a machine. A man. Archon Sable. His immaculate tunic was torn. A fresh plasma burn seared his cheek. He was alone, and he was radiating pure, cold, human fury. "Warden!" he spat, his voice a rasp. You animal! You have destroyed property." He was holding a small, silver device. "My machines may be offline, but I am not. This is a resonance nullifier. A little something I prepared. Just for you." He activated it. Jackson felt it instantly. A cold, leaden weight. His connection to the core, his power, his ability. It was not gone, but it was muted. It was like trying to breathe underwater. "Now," Sable said, drawing a heavy plasma pistol. "We finish this. The old-fashioned way. Matter versus matter," Sable charged, firing as he came. Jackson did not have the power to bend the plasma. He did not have the strength to stop it. He just moved. He was not a mechanic. He was the Warden Prime, the Empress's first. He was a trained, lethal, and very, very angry man. He dived, not away, but through the plasma bolts, the residual energy searing his overalls. He hit Sable with a shoulder check that sent the Slider Man flying. The nullifier clattered across the floor. Sable snarled, scrambling up, lunging for the device. Jackson kicked it away. It was not a fight. It was a brawl. A brutal, desperate clash of 2 men in the heart of a giant machine. Sable was a fencer, all precision and cold rage. Jackson was a brawler, all strength and remembered burning purpose. Sable drew a kinetic knife. Jackson caught his wrist. He did not just stop the wrist. He willed the nerve endings in Sable's arm to stop firing. Sable screamed, dropping the knife as his entire arm went numb and useless. Jackson hit him. Once. A single, focused, devastating punch that sent Sable crashing into a power conduit. Jackson, stood over him, panting. He picked up Sable's plasma pistol. He pressed it to the Archon's forehead. He could end it. The revenge. The pain. The man who had hunted him. The man who had threatened his... He looked over. Selena. Iria. Kyle. They were watching from the control room, their faces pressed against the glass. No one touches the children. He remembered his own rule. He lowered the pistol. This is not revenge, Jackson panted. This is justice. He turned from the gasping, defeated Sable. He walked to the main comms panel. Borvo, Celine. Are you getting this? We are, Jax. Celine's voice came over his earpiece, thick with tears. We have it all. Jackson's interface with the core. It had not just been a broadcast. It had been a download. While his mind was shattering, he had, on pure Warden's instinct, pulled everything. He had Sable's private server. This is Jackson Reed, he said, his voice now clear and cold. Broadcasting to the station, to the fringe, to the galaxy. And this is the truth. He hit the send key, and the galaxy watched. They saw Sable's direct, encrypted orders from Prime Region Cauldron. They saw the Purge command. They saw the faked evidence. They saw the sterilization protocols for Spindlehaven. They saw the real bounties, not for retrieval, but for assassination. They saw everything. In the station heart, the rabble, the Crete hunter, Borvo, a dozen mechanics Jackson vaguely recognized, slowly walked in. They were not looking at Jackson. They were looking at the defeated Archon. They surrounded him, their faces a mixture of terror and a new, hard fury. Sable was not trapped by stone. He was trapped by the people. It is over, Jackson said. Sable, his arm numb, his reputation destroyed, his army gone, was helped to his feet by the Crete. He was smiling, a cold, thin, spiteful smile. You think you have won, Warden, he hissed. You are still a fool. You are still just a tool. It is over, Sable, Jackson said, walking toward Celine. The law, the people, they are coming for Cauldron. Sable laughed, a dry, choking sound. The law, the people. You have your family. He nodded toward Iria and Kale, who were now running from the control room, running toward Jackson. You really believe, Sable sneered, his voice dropping. You really, honestly, believe they called you Dad? By coincidence, the word hit Jackson harder than the singularity. Coincidence. He froze, his blood turning to ice. The memories. The shattered, burning memories. They were of 2 children. His children. He looked at Iria and Kale, who stopped, suddenly uncertain. He looked at their violet eyes, the Empress's eyes. He turned, slowly, to Selene. She was standing at the control room door, her hand over her mouth. Her eyes were not victorious. They were terrified. They were guilty. It was a secret, a 5-year-old secret, a secret she had kept. The fog was gone, and in its place was a new and far more terrifying darkness. Sable's last word hung in the vast, echoing silence of the station heart. Coincidence. It was an accusation. It was a verdict. It was the final, turning key in the lock of Jackson's shattered memory. He stood frozen, his hand still outstretched toward the comms panel. the digital ghosts of Cauldron's treason flickering on the screen. The Crete Hunter and Borvo, their faces hard and devoid of their earlier fear, were binding the stunned, smiling Archon with heavy-duty zip ties. But Jackson did not see them. He only saw Celine. She was standing by the control room door, her hand still over her mouth. Her eyes, those sharp pilot's eyes that had seen him through a nebula, were wide with a 5-year-old terror, a terror of this exact moment. "Celine," Jackson said. His voice was not his own. It was a new, old voice, a blend of the mechanic's gravel and the warden's cold, absolute steel. "You knew." It was not a question. Iria and Kale, who had been running toward him, stopped. They sensed the shift, a sudden drop in temperature, a change in the resonance that bound them. They looked back and forth, from Jackson's new, terrifying stillness to Celine's sudden, profound fragility. Celine's voice broke. She let her hand fall. "Jackson, you have to understand. It was a promise." "You knew," he repeated. The memories, unlocked by the core, were no longer a flood. They were a torrent, and her words were the dam breaking. He saw her, not as a cynical smuggler. He saw her in the polished silver and gold armor of the Empress's royal guard. He saw her at his side, in a burning palace, her face grim, fighting back to back with him. "I was your second warden," she whispered, the name falling from her lips like a stone. "My oath was to the Empress, but my duty was to you, and to the secret." "The secret," Jackson said, the word tasting like ash. He saw it now. The rebellion, the fire, the Empress, Hirati, her face streaked with soot, pressing her 2 infants into his arms. "Cauldron has won the day, my warden. But he will not win the future. Protect them. Protect our—" They are mine," Jackson breathed, the truth hitting him with the force of a plasma bolt. "His children. The Empress's children. And the product of a hidden love, a bond that was more than just psychic. When you made the choice—" Celine was crying now, silent, angry tears. "When you decided to break yourself, to build the fog, you did not just erase yourself. Jax, you erased us. You erased everything." She stepped forward, her hands clenched. "I found you on Spindlehaven. 4 years ago, a gray, empty ghost. You looked right through me. The man I loved was gone. And I had to just let you be, because that was the plan, your plan, to be nobody, to be the one thing Cauldron's scanners, his spies, his armies, would never, ever look for." "You watched me," Jackson said, the mechanic's sense of betrayal warring with the warden's cold understanding. "All this time, you were my shadow." "I was your guard," she corrected him, her voice fierce. "I was keeping the promise you made me forget. I was protecting the possible family. I was protecting the anchor. Until the day they would need you. Until the day they would come and call you." He finally understood. The hunters in the bar, their fear. They had not been afraid of the children. They had been afraid of the law. But the law, the anchor protocol, had only been a symptom of the truth. The truth was biological, foundational. "Coincidence," he whispered again, looking at Iria and Kale. It was fate." The silence was broken by Borvo clearing his throat. The Xylotian looked deeply uncomfortable. "Warden, anchor, sir, Ah, the trash is secured. He is talking." Jackson tore his gaze from Celine. He was Jackson. He was the warden. He was a father. He had to be all three. He nodded. Sable was in a pressurized cargo container, under the watchful, three-eyed gaze of Borvo. The public humiliation, the destruction of his army, and the revelation of his defeat had broken his cold facade. When Jackson entered, Sable looked up, his face bruised and swollen. He will kill me," Sable whispered. "Cauldron, for this failure, for this data. I am a dead man." "You are," Jackson agreed, his voice cold. "Unless you are a witness." Sable's full, recorded confession was a masterpiece of terrified, spiteful truth. He detailed Cauldron's 5-year plot, the assassination of the Empress's loyalists, the systematic purge of the old court, the disappearance of the Empress herself, and, finally, the desperate, galaxy-wide hunt for the assets the two children Cauldron knew were the only living things that could challenge his rule. He had built his entire regency in their absence. Spindlehaven began to breathe again. The station, which had cowered under Sable's fleet, was now reborn. The silence of fear was replaced by the roar of activity. The common folk Jackson had rallied were not just survivors. They were victors. The first, most immediate change was the cloud of tumbling, dead drones. It became a salvage operation. The Crete hunter, whose name was Vorl, organized a massive station-wide effort to haul the scrap into the empty docking bays. In the Copper Narwhal, now the unofficial center of the New Haven Alliance, Borvo poured drinks for free, his 3 eyes gleaming. And in the central plaza, someone a welder Jackson had never met. A quiet woman from Deck 4 began to build, using the fused molten black metal of Sable's own hunter-killers. She erected a massive, 20-meter-high sculpture. It was not a statue of Jackson. It was a monument to his rule. The stark, powerful words, welded into the steel for all the galaxy to see, "No one touches the children." It was a declaration. The Haven was not just a place. It was an idea. A call came from Dr. Orrin Hale. His face on the Alibi's comm screen was pale, his white hair a mess, his eyes wide with something close to religious awe. "Jackson, Warden, I have seen the data," he stammered. He had been analyzing the full, raw, uncorrupted data burst from Jackson's interface with the station heart. The scans, the resonance. "Jackson, I was wrong," Dr. Hale said. "It is not a rare compatibility. It is not 1 in a billion. Jackson, your genetic sequence is not an anomaly. It is the source." Jackson and Celine, sitting in the ship's cockpit, listened, the air thin. "The Aurelian line," Hale explained, his voice shaking. It was engineered, thousands of years ago, from a baseline. A root anchor sequence. A warden sequence. They built the lock to match your key. You are not just an anchor, Jackson. You are the original anchor. The compatibility is not just deep. It is foundational. The Empress, the entire line. It was designed to resonate with you and your heirs. Jackson looked at his hands. The hands of a mechanic. The hands of a warden. The hands of a father. He finally, truly, understood the weight of the promise he had made, the weight of the memory he had chosen to erase. He had not just been the Empress's shadow guard, he had been family. The alibi was a haven within the haven. Jackson, Celine, Iria, and Cale sat in the small mess hall, a plate of reconstituted nutrient paste on the table. It was the first meal they had shared in truth. The silence was deafening. Jackson was a stranger in his own skin. The warden's cold, tactical mind warring with the mechanic's gentle, broken heart. Celine was no longer a cynical smuggler, but a woman mourning a 5-year-long lie. Iria was the one who broke the silence. Mom told us, she said, her small voice cutting through the tension. She was not looking at Jackson, but at her plate. Cale nodded, his own expression preternaturally serious. She told us the night of the fire. Jackson's breath hitched. He looked at Celine. She just nodded, her eyes closed. She said, Iria continued, her voice a perfect echo of a memory. My children, you are going to go on a long, long journey. You will be very afraid. You will be very alone. But you will not be lost. She said, Kyle picked up, his voice just as clear. One day, you will be in the greatest danger, Jack, and you must look. You must feel. You will find a man. He will be warm. He will feel like home. He will not know you. He cannot know you, but you will know him. Iria looked up, her violet eyes, his eyes locking with Jackson's. And she said, Iria finished, her voice trembling but strong, do not be afraid. The day you call him Dad, the world will begin to change. Jackson's control broke. The warden's stoicism, the mechanic's defenses, they shattered. A single tear, the first in a memory he now owned, traced a path through the grease on his cheek. He was whole. He was Jackson Reed. He was the Warden Prime. And he was a father. And the Warden Prime wanted blood. The mechanic in him had built a new rule. The warden in him wanted to enforce it. He stood up, the chair scraping on the metal deck. Celine, plot a course, Imperial capital, direct. We are ending this. Ending this? Celine asked, standing to face him. Her voice was quiet, but it held a new strength. The strength of a truth finally spoken. How? Jackson, how are we ending this? Cauldron, Jackson said, the name a snarl. The warden was in control now, the cold, tactical mind firing. He used a scalpel to purge the court. I will be a hammer. I will go to the capital. I will unmake his council. I will use the power I have, the power he wanted, and I will dismantle his entire corrupt machine, piece by piece. I will be the revenge he never saw coming. No. The word was so quiet, so absolute, it stopped him. What did you say? He asked. I said no, Celine repeated, stepping in front of him. I have loved you. I have mourned you. For 5 years. Jackson. I have watched a ghost fix toasters in a bar, all the while praying for the warden to wake up. Well, he is awake, and I do not. I do not like him. Celine. No, she said, her voice rising. That hammer you were talking about, that is him. That is the man who chose to break himself, who chose to leave, who chose to run. That is the man who would burn the galaxy down to protect his own heart. That is not the man I see. Not all of him. She put her hand on his chest, right over his heart. The warden wants revenge. But Jackson, the mechanic, he wanted justice. He wanted to fix things. He built a new rule. Remember, no one touches the children. You want to go to the Capitol as a hammer, Jackson. You will be just another cauldron, a new tyrant with a better, sadder story. She looked at Iria and Kale, who were watching, wide-eyed. You will be using their power, their love, to justify your own war. I will not let you do that. Which one is it, Jax? Which one? Are you? He was at war. The cold, righteous fury of the warden versus the new, gentle, and powerful heart of the mechanic, the heart of the anchor. He looked at his children. He looked at the woman he now remembered he loved. The warden's rage did not break. It reformed. It cooled. It solidified. It became the steel of a shield. You are right, he said, his voice quiet, but now whole. A hammer only breaks things, but a mechanic builds. He looked at Selene. He thinks we are assassins. He thinks we are coming for revenge. He is waiting for the warden. He will not be waiting for Jackson. A new plan formed, not of revenge, but of truth. We will not go as assassins, Jackson said. We will not go as a hammer. We will go as a family. He knelt, so he was eye to eye with Iria and Kale. Cauldron. He is afraid of the law. He is afraid of the Codex. He is afraid of us. We will go to the Galactic Senate, Selene said, her eyes lighting up, catching his plan. We will go. Publicly. We will not use force. We will use the law. Jackson nodded. We will show them the truth, just like we showed the Haven. The alibi was prepped for the journey. It was a new ship. The grateful mechanics of Spindlehaven had upgraded it. They had salvaged the best of the drone technology, integrating new, silent-running engines, a salvaged military-grade shield, and a new coat of paint. Borvo and Vorl stood at the docking bay, a small mountain of supplies, food, water, energy cells, a gift from the Haven. You are. Sure, you do not want. The army, Borvo asked, gesturing to the 36 armed smugglers and mechanics standing behind him. No, Borvo, Jackson said, smiling. A real tired Jackson smile. This is not that kind of fix, but keep the faith and keep building. The four of them, Jackson, Selene, Iria. Kyle stood on the ramp. The alibi's engines hummed. This was it. The journey to the heart of the storm. Jackson was in the co-pilot seat, running a final diagnostic, his hands moving with the familiar, easy grace of the mechanic. But his mind was the warden's, calculating, seeing, feeling the energy of the ship. Iria came and stood beside his chair. Are you scared? Dad, she asked, her voice small. Jackson stopped. He looked at her. He felt everything. The warden's power, the mechanic's weariness, the father's terror. Yes, he said, I am. Me too, she whispered. She was quiet for a moment. Then, A tiny, mischievous smile touched her lips. You know. Your jokes. They are really bad, she said. Jackson looked at her, confused. What, earlier, she said. When you were fixing the ship with Captain Mom. You told Kyle the capacitor was shocked to be broken. A sound, rusty and unfamiliar, left Jackson's chest. It was a laugh. A short, surprised, real laugh. Iria smiled, a full, bright smile. See terrible. She leaned against his chair, her small hand grabbing his. But, she whispered, her voice suddenly serious. They make me feel less scared. Jackson's hand tightened on hers. He looked forward at the swirling, blue-white vortex of hyperlight. Celine, in the pilot's seat, met his gaze. She was not a guard. She was not a smuggler. She was his partner. He was not a hammer. He was a shield. Celine, he said, take us home. The Galactic Senate chamber was a theater of cold light and colder ambition. It was not a room. It was a void, a sphere of polished black obsidian, where 1,000 holographic delegates shimmered in their suspended pods, arranged in a spiraling galaxy of judgment. In the center, on a raised, floating disk of white marble, stood Prime Regent Cauldron. Billions watched. Every screen, every datapad, every public square from the core worlds to the fringe was tuned to this moment. This was not a session. It was a show trial. And Jackson Reed was the star. He stood on a small, transport-scarred freighter platform that had been permitted to dock he, Celine, Iria, and Kyle. They looked impossibly small, 4 refugees in the center of an artificial universe. We see before us, citizens of the Empire. Cauldron's voice boomed, synthesized, and perfectly modulated for sympathy. A tragedy. He gestured to Jackson. Cauldron was not a warrior like Sable. He was a politician, his robes immaculate, his face a mask of handsome, reasonable grief. We see a man, Jackson Reed, a mechanic from the lawless fringe. A man who, in his grief and delusion, stumbled upon the lost heirs of our beloved, vanished Empress. Cauldron's face filled the holographic sky above them. We see a man who kidnapped them, a man who, when confronted by lawful authorities, responded with unconscionable violence. He destroyed a fleet of peacekeeping drones. He assaulted a decorated Archon. He is allied with smugglers and terrorists. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. And now, he comes here, to the heart of government, wrapped in the robes of a charlatan. He claims a mystical, ancient power. He claims to be an anchor. He is a kidnapper who now fancies himself a king. He pointed a single, accusatory finger. He is here, good citizens, to usurp the very power he pretends to serve. He is here to finish the coup he started. Jackson stood silent, his face a mask. He was the warden, the mechanic, the father. And he was a shield. He had come here for this. He had known this was the trap. Cauldron smiled, a thin, reptilian gesture. We will, of course, retrieve the children. They will be taken into protective custody. The man, Reed, will be tried for his many crimes. Prime Regent Cauldron. The voice was not Jackson's. It was Celine's. She stepped forward, her pilot's jacket seeming scandalously practical in the grand hall. She held a datapad. "You speak of the law," Celine said, her voice clear and sharp, cutting through the synthesized acoustics. "Let us speak of the truth. You speak of the vanished empress. Let us speak of the vault of crowns." A murmur, a digital hiss, passed through the 1,000 delegates. The vault was a myth, a bedtime story. Caldron's smile did not falter, but his eyes went cold. "Captain Park, the smuggler, quoting children's fables. The vault of crowns does not exist." "It does," Celine countered. "And it is not a place. It is a prison. An ancient, biotechnical stasis field, designed to protect the Imperial Seal and the Imperial Matriarch in times of great crisis. It is, Prime Regent, where you put her." The hiss from the delegates became a roar. "A wild, baseless accusation," Caldron thundered, "from a known criminal." "Is it?" Celine said. "The Shard Monastery's codex, which I have right here, states that the vault is shielded from all forms of technology. It cannot be scanned, it cannot be tracked, and it certainly cannot be opened by a political committee." She looked at Caldron. "It has only 2 keys." "This is madness," Caldron shouted, his composure finally cracking. "This farce is over, guards. Seize the man, secure the children." A dozen of Caldron's personal black-armored sentinels marched onto the platform, their rifles raised. "The first key," Celine continued, shouting over the guards, "is the Imperial bloodline. The second is the original anchor." Jackson Reed looked at the advancing guards. He looked at the terrified, holographic faces of the Senate. He was a shield. He raised his hand. He did not command stone. He did not bend plasma. He simply resonated. It was not a sound. It was a feeling of truth, a pure, undeniable harmonic chord that swept through the Senate. It was the frequency of the Empress, of the bloodline, of the promise. The guards stopped. Their rifles, their armor, their very nervous systems ceased to obey them. They were frozen, not by stone, but by the absolute biological authority in the room. The anchor was here. Caldron's face, for the first time, was a mask of pure, abject terror. "No, it is not possible." "It is time," Jackson said. His voice was quiet, but it was the only sound in the galaxy. He knelt, turning his back on the Senate, on Caldron, on the entire frozen tableau. He looked only at his children. "Iria, Kyle, it is all right. It is just one last fix." They nodded, their small faces set with a trust so profound it ached. They walked to him. Iria took his right hand. Kyle took his left. The familiar. The key, the anchor and the blood. Jackson closed his eyes. He let the warden, the mechanic, and the father merge. He let the power flow, not as a wave of rage, but as a precise, focused, and loving signal. He called. And in the very center of the Senate chamber, the universe answered. The air did not ripple. It tore. With the sound of 1,000 perfect bells ringing in unison, reality itself seemed to split, revealing a new, impossible object. It was not a vault. It was a seed, a massive, crystalline, biomechanical pod that unfurled in the center of the hall, its petals of light and metal opening to the resonance Jackson was broadcasting. The Senate was silent. The billions watching held their breath. The vault of crowns opened, inside. She was not in a stasis field. She was simply waiting. She stepped out onto the marble floor. She was tall, regal, and radiated an authority that made Caldron's political posturing seem like a child's tantrum. Her violet eyes, the same eyes as her children, scanned the room. Empress Harati was alive. "Treason!" Cauldron choked, scrambling backward. "A clone, a hologram, a trick guard sees them. Sees her, it is a lie." The Empress's gaze landed on him. It was not anger. It was pity. "You have lived so long with lies, Cauldron," she said, her voice clear and pure, silencing the entire galaxy, "that you no longer recognize the truth." Her gaze swept past him. It ignored the Senate. It landed on Jackson, who was still kneeling, his children clinging to him, the ritual complete. She walked toward him, not as an empress, not as a ghost, but as a woman. She stopped in front of him. The entire galaxy watched in tight, holographic close-up. As the Empress of 1,000 worlds reached down and put her hand on the cheek of a tired, grease-stained mechanic. "My warden," she whispered. Then she looked up, at the Senate, at the galaxy, at the history books. "You accuse him of a coup, Cauldron." Her voice was no longer a whisper. It was a sword. "You who locked me in that vault, you, who purged my court, murdered my guard, and hunted my children." "Your children," Cauldron spat, his sanity breaking. "They are assets, they are the line, nothing more." The Empress looked at Cauldron. And, for the first time, she smiled. It was a terrible, beautiful, and victorious smile. "They are the line, yes," she said. "But you seem to have forgotten why." She turned back to Jackson. She placed her hand on Iria's head, her other on Kale's. "You accuse him of usurping power." Her voice, for a moment, broke. The first sign of the 5 years of pain. "He is not a usurper. He is their father." The word, the truth, hit the galaxy with the force of a supernova. "I did not vanish," the Empress continued, her composure returning, steeling itself. "I fled a coup. Your coup, Cauldron. I sealed myself away as a last resort. To wait until my children were ready, until my love was found. I did it to protect the line. I did it to protect them. From you." She pointed. At Cauldron. The truth was out. The game was over. Cauldron did not scream. He did not fight. He simply ran. He turned, his political dignity evaporating, and sprinted for his private, shielded exit. He hit the door control. The door hissed open. He was not met by his guards. He was met by a Xylotian, a tall, three-eyed log creature in a bartender's apron, holding a very large, very heavy-looking trophy from the Spindle Haven salvage. "Sorry, friend," Borvo's voice echoed in the now silent Senate. "The bar is closed." Behind him stood Vorl the Crete, and behind him stood a dozen Spindle Haven mechanics, their faces smudged with grease, their hands holding tools. Cauldron stared, baffled. This was not possible. This was the rabble. He was surrounded, not by soldiers, not by guards. He was arrested, his reign ended, by the very common folk he had dismissed. Celine stepped forward, a satisfied smirk on her face. She tapped her data pad. "We brought friends," she murmured to Jackson. "Just in case." In the center of the hall, the Empress turned to the Senate. "The Regency Council is dissolved," she declared. Then she looked at Jackson. And Celine. Her face was impossibly sad, and impossibly proud. "The past is past," she said, her voice soft. "But the future must be protected." She raised her voice once more. "By imperial decree, I grant the Royal Protection Charter of the Throne to Warden Jackson Reed and Captain Celine Park." She was legalizing them. She was making their family a fortress. "They and their children are under the direct protection of the Crown," she said. "The hunt is over. A new government will be formed, one based not on secret laws, but on public trust. The galaxy was erupting. The cheers were deafening. Jackson stood up. He was stunned. He was the warden. He was the mechanic. He was a father. He looked at Hirati, his empress, his past. She smiled at him. A sad, beautiful, final smile. It was a goodbye. She had the galaxy to rebuild. He had his family. He felt a tug. Iria was holding his hand. Kale was holding his other. They looked up at him. The chaos of the Senate fading away. The roaring crowds becoming a distant hum. "Dad," Kale whispered. "Take us home," Iria finished. Jackson Reed looked at his children. He looked at Selena, who was already walking toward the ramp, a faint smirk on her face. He nodded. He turned his back on the throne, on the power, on the Empress, and walked his family back to their ship. The Alibi floated in the dark, overlooking Spindle Haven. It was no longer a metal calamity. It was a beacon. A holographic sign shimmered where the copper narwhal used to be. The Jackson Reed Academy of Resonance Physics, open to all species. The station was bright. It was clean. It was alive. In the cockpit. Celine sipped a cup of synth coffee. Jackson stood behind her, watching the station. In the reflection of the glass, he could see Iria and Kale, asleep in the passenger bay, curled up together, safe. "So," Celine said, her voice quiet, "that was a lot. The Empress is even taller in person." Jackson did not smile. He just watched. "Are you okay?" she asked, turning in her chair to look at him. "You did not get your big warden revenge. Cauldron is on trial, not in pieces." Jackson looked at her. The warden's coldness was gone. The mechanic's fog was gone. He was just Jackson. "I got my revenge," he said, his voice a low rumble. He gestured with his chin toward the station, at the new schools, the new docks, the new hope. He gestured to the reflection of his sleeping children. "I got my revenge," Jackson whispered to Celine, "by making the world worth living in." A long, quiet moment passed between them. Celine's lip quirked. A small, tired, genuine Celine smile. Jackson found himself smiling back. A slow, rusty Jackson smile. It was not a laugh. It was theirs. It was enough.